Keanu Reeves stepped out of a sleek black limousine onto the neon-lit entrance of Empire Grand Casino, an extravagant, high-end establishment catering to the world's elite. The golden chandeliers gleamed overhead as he strolled inside, his tailored black suit accentuating his effortless coolness, his long dark hair slightly tousled, and his deep-set eyes scanning the lively casino floor. He moved with an air of quiet confidence, barely acknowledging the hushed whispers and side glances from guests who immediately recognized him. He wasn't here for attention or spectacle, just a peaceful evening with a game of poker, a drink in hand, and the tranquil rhythm of shuffling cards. Despite being one of the most famous actors in the world, Keanu preferred blending in, enjoying the ambience rather than basking in celebrity treatment. The sound of clinking chips, occasional cheers from the roulette tables, and smooth jazz in the background created the perfect atmosphere for a night of relaxation. He approached the high-stakes poker section, a restricted area where only the wealthiest and most exclusive patrons were allowed to play. The dealer greeted him with a respectful nod as he took a seat at a plush, dark leather chair, across from a group of wealthy men already deep into the game. A waiter approached, offering him a drink, and he requested a simple whiskey on the rocks. Nothing too extravagant, just something smooth to sip on as he played. The other players barely acknowledged his presence at first, focused on their massive bets and unreadable expressions, their expensive watches glinting under the chandelier's glow. Keanu calmly studied the table, observing the dynamics, noting who played aggressively and who bluffed too often. His ability to remain unreadable, a skill honed from years of discipline and self-control, made him an excellent player, even among the rich and powerful. As the dealer shuffled the deck and the first hand was dealt, Keanu casually pushed forward a sizable stack of chips, his expression unreadable. The game progressed smoothly for the first few rounds, with Keanu making strategic plays, winning some, losing others, yet remaining entirely unfazed. His demeanor stood in contrast to some of the more arrogant, ostentatious players who thrived on boasting about their wins and lamenting their losses. However, across the table, a loud, deep chuckle interrupted the game's usual tension. A middle-aged man with graying hair, an expensive cigar in hand, and a smug smirk on his face. He was impeccably dressed, exuding old-money confidence, the kind of person who had been raised on privilege and thrived on belittling those he deemed unworthy. His eyes scanned Keanu with a mix of amusement and skepticism, as if trying to place where he had seen him before. Keanu, completely uninterested in small talk, remained focused on the game, but the older man had different intentions. He leaned back in his chair, exhaling a cloud of cigar smoke, before flashing a condescending grin in Keanu's direction. Well, looks like we've got ourselves a Hollywood pretty boy trying to play with the big dogs," he scoffed, his voice dripping with arrogance. A few players exchanged uneasy glances, sensing the tension beginning to stir, but no one spoke up. Keanu merely raised an eyebrow, unfazed, as he picked up his cards and continued the game without reacting. The man wasn't done, though. He thrived on making others uncomfortable, and he clearly viewed Keanu as an easy target. "Tell me, son, what's an actor doing in a place like this? Thought you people spent all your money on mansions and fast cars. Or did the movie checks stop coming in?" he added, eliciting a few nervous chuckles from those around him. Keanu still didn't respond, his fingers lightly tapping against the table as he waited for his turn to bet. His silence only emboldened the man further, his smirk widening as he leaned in closer. "Let me guess. You think you can actually win against us? I've seen guys like you before, hotshot celebrities who think they belong here. But let me tell you something, kid," he said, voice dropping lower. "This isn't Hollywood. This is real money, real power. And you're just an actor playing a role you don't belong in." The insult lingered in the air as a hush fell over the table. Keanu finally glanced up, his dark eyes meeting the man's smug gaze for the first time. He didn't say anything, not yet, but the quiet intensity in his expression suggested that this night was about to take an interesting turn. The older man took a slow drag from his cigar, exhaling the smoke as if he had already won whatever battle he was trying to start with Keanu. His confidence radiated an air of untouchable arrogance, the kind that came from decades of wealth, power, and a lifetime of never being told no. His lips curled into a smirk as he leaned back, observing Keanu with the condescension of someone who believed himself superior in every possible way. "You're awfully quiet, aren't you?" he mused, his voice oozing with mock amusement. "What's the matter? No script to read from?" No director to tell you what to say. The other players exchanged wary glances, some shifting uncomfortably in their seats, but no one dared to intervene. The casino's atmosphere buzzed with an uneasy tension, the murmurs of nearby guests growing quieter as people began to take notice of the exchange. Keanu, ever composed, sipped his whiskey, his gaze still fixed on his cards, as if the man's words were nothing more than background noise. But the older man wasn't satisfied with being ignored. He wanted a reaction. He chuckled dryly, shaking his head. That's the thing about actors, he continued, swirling the liquor in his glass. They spend their whole lives pretending to be someone they're not. Playing tough guys on screen, thinking that makes them tough in real life. But this... He gestured around the opulent casino floor, where millions of dollars changed hands in an instant. This isn't a movie set. This is where real men play. He punctuated his statement with a smug grin, as if expecting Keanu to shrink under the weight of his words. Keanu remained silent, his face unreadable, his fingers lightly drumming against the table's polished wood surface. The dealer continued distributing the cards, the game moving forward, but the older man's focus remained locked onto Keanu. Tell me, the man pressed, his voice dipping into something darker, more aggressive. Do you even know how to play, or are you just here to look cool? Because let me tell you something, son, this isn't a charity table. If you don't belong, you should leave before you embarrass yourself. The insult lingered in the air, heavy with provocation, but Keanu still didn't bite. Instead, he calmly placed his bet, pushing forward a stack of chips without breaking his neutral expression. The sheer lack of reaction only fueled the older man's frustration. He let out a short, incredulous laugh, shaking his head. Unbelievable, he muttered, turning to the other players as if to rally them into his mockery. Is this what Hollywood's churning out these days? A bunch of mute pretty boys who don't have the guts to speak up. A few nervous chuckles rippled through the table, but no one seemed eager to fully side with the man. His power came from intimidation, but there was something about Keanu's presence, his unwavering calm, that made it difficult to truly mock him. Still, the man pressed on. You know what your problem is? He asked, leaning forward now, his voice dropping just loud enough for everyone at the table to hear. You think you're better than us. You sit there all quiet, trying to act all mysterious, but I see through that act. You're nothing but a two-bit actor who got lucky. He smirked, watching for a reaction, but Keanu merely glanced at his cards again, taking another sip of whiskey, his expression still unreadable. The older man scoffed, his patience thinning. Let me guess, he continued, tapping his fingers against his chips. You're one of those humble rich guys, right? The ones who pretend they don't care about money while sitting at a table like this? Give me a break. He rolled his eyes, turning to the other guests now, including the ones watching from nearby tables. I mean, look at him. The great Keanu Reeves, sitting here like he's some wise monk. Tell me, Hollywood boy, do you even belong in a place like this? Keanu's fingers finally stilled against the table, the faintest flicker of something shifting in his expression, so subtle that only the most observant would notice. The older man saw it, and his grin widened, mistaking it for a crack in Keanu's armor. That's what I thought, he said smugly, nodding in self-satisfaction. You don't belong here. You're just another celebrity pretending to be one of us. The words echoed through the high-stakes room, the onlookers now fully engaged, waiting to see if Keanu would finally respond. But instead of anger, instead of embarrassment, there was only silence, the kind that sent an unshakable chill through the air. Keanu's whiskey glass met the table with a soft clink, his fingers lightly tracing the rim as he let the moment stretch. The insult had been delivered, the gauntlet thrown. And while the older man believed he had won the exchange, he had no idea that he had just made the biggest mistake of the night. The poker table had gone eerily silent, the once lively chatter of the high-stakes room now replaced by a thick, almost suffocating tension. Every guest within earshot had turned their attention toward the brewing confrontation, their curiosity outweighing their politeness. The older man, emboldened by Keanu's silence, leaned forward, his cigar resting between two fingers as he exhaled another cloud of smoke, letting it drift lazily toward Keanu as if marking his territory. You know, I don't think I've ever seen someone so out of place at this table, he mused, his voice coated in venomous amusement. It's almost adorable. You've got the look, I'll give you that, the sharp suit, the brooding stare, But that's all Hollywood tricks, isn't it? It's all an illusion. Keanu remained motionless, his dark eyes fixed on his cards, giving nothing away. His quiet composure wasn't submission, it was something else, something unsettling in its stillness. The older man mistook it for weakness, a mistake he would soon regret. I mean, let's be honest, the man continued, flicking the ash from his cigar onto the tray beside him. You've spent your whole career pretending. Pretending to be an action hero. Pretending to be a badass. But let me tell you something, son. This. He gestured toward the stacks of chips in front of him, the gleaming luxury of the casino, the air of exclusivity. This isn't the movies. There's no stunt double here to save you, no script to make you look good. You either belong, or you don't. A low murmur rippled through the crowd, guests whispering amongst themselves, some glancing at Keanu with a mix of pity and curiosity, wondering if he would finally speak. The dealer hesitated, waiting for Keanu's signal to continue the game, but the moment had become something else now, something beyond poker. The older man chuckled, shaking his head as he swirled the amber liquid in his glass. Tell me, Keanu, can I call you Keanu? Do you even have enough money to be sitting here? Or are you just another one of those celebrities who pretends to be rich while spending your last dime trying to fit in? The insult was sharp, deliberate, aimed to humiliate. A few people in the crowd let out hushed gasps, recognizing the audacity of the remark. But Keanu still didn't react, not with words, not with anger, not with even a flicker of irritation. Instead, he simply took another slow sip of his whiskey, setting the glass down with practiced ease. The lack of response only fueled the older man's arrogance. He leaned in even closer, lowering his voice so only those nearest could hear. You know what I think, he said, his tone taking on an edge of cruelty. I think you're afraid. Afraid that without the cameras, without the directors telling you how to act, you're just another nobody. A washed-up action star with no real power. A heavier silence fell over the table. Even the other players, who had been careful not to get involved, exchanged uneasy glances. There was something about the way Keanu remained perfectly still, the way his jaw tensed ever so slightly, that sent a quiet warning, a warning the older man was too blind to see. He chuckled again, mistaking Keanu's silence for submission, mistaking his restraint for weakness. Hell, maybe you're just here because you need the money, the man continued, his grin widening as he took another sip of his drink. That's it, isn't it? You've fallen on hard times. The roles aren't coming in like they used to, the money's drying up, and now you're trying to play with the real players, hoping to get lucky. He let out a cruel laugh, shaking his head. Pathetic. The word hung in the air, sharp as a blade. A few guests exchanged worried glances, sensing that the man had gone too far. Even the dealer hesitated, fingers resting on the deck as he waited for Keanu's reaction. But still, Keanu remained composed, his fingers tracing the rim of his whiskey glass in slow, deliberate circles. Then, finally, he moved. It was subtle, just a small shift in his posture, just the way his eyes lifted to meet the older man's for the first time that evening. And in that instant, something changed. The room, already tense, seemed to shrink, the weight of Keanu's gaze pressing down like an unspoken force. The smug grin on the older man's face faltered, just for a second, just enough for those watching to notice. But he quickly masked it, scoffing as he leaned back in his chair. Oh, what's this? He said mockingly. You finally gonna say something, movie star? Or are you just gonna sit there and let a real man walk all over you? The challenge was blatant now, the arrogance bleeding through every word. The crowd around them had fully tuned in, some pretending to focus on their games while discreetly watching, others blatantly staring, captivated by the slow-burning tension. Keanu's fingers tapped the table once, twice, before he finally spoke. His voice was low, calm, but there was an unmistakable weight behind it. You talk too much. The older man blinked, momentarily thrown off by the unexpected response. But then he scoffed, shaking his head. Oh, is that right? And what are you gonna do about it, Keanu? Keanu didn't answer right away. Instead, he leaned forward, mirroring the older man's earlier posture, his gaze unwavering. I was gonna let this slide, he said, his tone measured, deliberate. But you don't know when to stop. The words, though simple, carried an unmistakable finality. The older man let out another forced chuckle, trying to maintain his bravado. "Let it slide. Let it slide," he repeated, shaking his head. "Listen, son," but Keanu cut him off. "No," he said, his voice firm, a quiet authority seeping into every syllable. "You listen." And just like that, the entire casino held its breath, waiting for what would happen next. A thick, weighted silence settled over the table as Keanu's words cut through the older man's arrogance like a blade. The challenge had been issued, not in volume or aggression, but in something far more dangerous: quiet certainty. The kind that didn't need to be justified, the kind that carried the weight of experience. For the first time that evening, the older man hesitated, the smirk twitching at the edges of his lips, as if he was trying to convince himself that he still held control of the situation. He shifted in his seat, gripping his whiskey glass a little tighter before letting out a forced chuckle. "You listen," he repeated mockingly, shaking his head. "Now hold on there, Keanu. Just because you say a few words all serious like doesn't mean I'm gonna." Keanu raised a hand, palm up, and the older man stopped mid-sentence. It wasn't a dramatic gesture, nothing exaggerated, but it carried an authority that demanded attention. "I've been patient," Keanu said, his voice even, unwavering. "I've given you every opportunity to stop embarrassing yourself. But you just keep pushing." The air in the casino felt different now, charged with an unspoken energy, as if the entire room had shifted onto a different frequency. Every guest who had been whispering now fell silent. Every dealer whose hands had been shuffling cards now hesitated, their focus drawn to this singular moment. The older man's bravado flickered, just for an instant, but his pride wouldn't let him back down. He forced another smirk, leaning back as if unimpressed. "Oh, so now you're gonna lecture me? That's rich." He shook his head, laughing. "What's next? You gonna tell me about respect? Gonna teach me some Zen nonsense about inner peace?" He raised his glass in mock salute. "Save it, Hollywood. You don't impress me." Keanu's expression didn't change. He didn't rise to the bait, didn't let the insult provoke him. Instead, he picked up his own glass and took a slow sip, savoring the whiskey before setting it down with deliberate care. Then he spoke. "You think this is about impressing you?" His tone wasn't angry. If anything, it was laced with the faintest trace of amusement. "You don't matter enough for that." The words landed like a punch, even though they were spoken with absolute calm. A few guests let out barely audible gasps, while others exchanged wide-eyed glances. The insult was so subtle, so controlled, that it didn't need theatrics to cut deep. The older man's face twitched, his grip tightening on his glass, but he quickly masked it with another forced laugh. "Oh, that's cute," he sneered. "Now you're trying to act tough." Keanu leaned forward slightly, resting his forearms on the table, his eyes locking onto the man's in a way that made it impossible to look away. "I don't have to act." The simplicity of the statement made it even more powerful. The weight behind it was undeniable, the kind of statement only a man who had lived through real challenges could deliver. The older man swallowed, a muscle in his jaw twitching. He opened his mouth as if to say something, but nothing came out. For the first time that night, he had no comeback. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating, until Keanu finally broke it. "You've been disrespectful since the moment I sat down," he said, his voice still steady, still measured. "You've insulted me, tried to belittle me, all because you think sitting at this table makes you powerful." He exhaled lightly, shaking his head. "But power isn't in money. It's not in how loud you talk, or how much you try to humiliate someone. Real power is knowing when to speak and when to stay silent." He paused, letting the words settle. "And you talk too much." The same words he had spoken earlier, but this time, they hit differently. The older man's face darkened, his pride struggling against the reality sinking in around him. The other players at the table, who had remained neutral up until now, shifted uncomfortably, their expressions betraying a subtle shift in allegiance. They might not have wanted to get involved, but it was clear who had the upper hand now. The dealer, sensing the atmosphere, hesitated before asking, "Shall we continue the game?" But no one responded. All eyes were on the older man, waiting to see how he would react. His smirk was gone now, his fingers drumming against the table in a restless, almost agitated rhythm. He wasn't used to this, wasn't used to being put in his place. And especially not by someone who hadn't even needed to raise his voice to do it. Finally, he let out a dry, humorless chuckle. "All right," he said, exhaling sharply. "I see how it is. You think you've won something here." He spread his arms in mock surrender. "Fine. Enjoy your little moment. But don't forget where you are, Keanu." He glanced around the casino, his lips curling into a smirk once more. "This place belongs to people like me. Not people like you." Keanu held his gaze for a long moment, then, almost imperceptibly, smiled. It was the kind of smile that held knowledge the other man didn't yet understand. And that, more than anything, unsettled him. Because suddenly, it felt like he was missing something. Like the joke was on him. And he had no idea why. The older man smirked, thinking he had the final word, basking in what little control he still believed he had. His fingers tapped against the green felt of the poker table. His cigar smoldering in the ashtray beside him, the smell of expensive whiskey lingering in the air. "This place belongs to people like me," he repeated, the arrogance dripping from every syllable. "Not people like you." His words were laced with confidence, convinced he had put Keanu in his place, convinced that his wealth and influence made him untouchable. But then, Keanu chuckled. It wasn't loud, wasn't mocking, just a quiet, knowing laugh, the kind that sent a ripple of unease through those who heard it. The older man's smirk faltered, just slightly. Keanu took his time, reaching for his whiskey glass, swirling the amber liquid before taking a slow sip. He set the glass down carefully, his fingers resting against the rim as he finally spoke. "Is that right?" The older man hesitated. There was something about Keanu's tone, calm, deliberate, as if he knew something no one else did. He glanced around, expecting others to back him up, expecting the casino security or management to step in, to remind Keanu of his place. But something strange happened. The dealers, the floor managers, even the pit bosses who had been silently observing, none of them moved. In fact, their expressions weren't just neutral. They were expectant, as if they knew what was coming. The older man frowned, straightening in his chair. "What the hell is that supposed to mean?" Keanu leaned back, his hands resting lightly on the table. "You've spent the entire night trying to make a point," he said. "Trying to convince yourself that you're the most important person in this room." His gaze flickered briefly over the crowd, then back to the man in front of him. "But there's something you don't understand." The older man scoffed. "Oh, and what's that?" Keanu let the silence stretch just a second longer before answering. "You're sitting in my casino." The words landed like a thunderclap. A hush fell over the entire room. For a moment, it was as if the entire world had paused, the weight of Keanu's statement sinking in, the realization dawning on every stunned face at the table. The older man blinked, confusion flashing in his eyes before he let out a forced laugh. "You're what?" He shook his head, glancing around as if waiting for someone to contradict Keanu, to tell him he was joking. But no one did. Instead, the dealers exchanged brief looks, the pit bosses stood a little straighter, and the security guards who had been watching the situation suddenly shifted their stance, not toward Keanu, but toward the older man. "No," the older man scoffed again, his laughter faltering. "No way. You're telling me you," he turned to one of the dealers, looking for confirmation. The dealer simply nodded. "Mr. Reeves is one of the primary investors," he said evenly. "This casino operates under his ownership." The older man's face paled. The smirk that had been plastered on his lips all night finally vanished, replaced by something much rarer, genuine shock. He turned back to Keanu, his mouth opening slightly, then closing again. He looked as if he wanted to deny it, wanted to argue, but the truth was right in front of him. And suddenly everything made sense. The way the staff had never interrupted Keanu. The way the managers had watched the conversation unfold without stepping in. The way the tension in the room had never been about whether Keanu was overstepping, but about how long he would let this man dig his own grave. "You're lying," the older man said weakly, but it sounded more like he was trying to convince himself. Keanu arched a brow. "Am I?" The older man looked around frantically, his confidence crumbling with every second that passed. No. No, this is some kind of joke. He turned to the security guards, now shifting toward him. You can't be serious. Do you know who I am? One of the guards simply nodded. Yes, sir. And we also know who he is. He gestured toward Keanu with a respectful nod. The older man's hands curled into fists. This is insane. Keanu exhaled lightly, shaking his head. What's insane is that you thought you could walk in here and treat people however you wanted. He sat forward slightly, his expression unreadable. You made a mistake tonight. Not because you disrespected me, but because you thought respect was something you could buy. He gestured around the opulent room, the high-stakes tables, the glittering chandeliers, the walls adorned with history and wealth. This place? It doesn't belong to people like you. It belongs to those who know the difference between power and character. He let the words settle, then nodded toward the guards. I think we're done here. The older man's eyes widened. Wait, hold on. I didn't know. You knew enough, Keanu interrupted, his voice final. Now, it's time for you to leave. The security guards stepped forward, one of them placing a firm hand on the older man's shoulder. Sir, let's go. The older man's mouth opened, a desperate plea forming on his lips, but he knew it was over. There was no more posturing, no more arrogance to hide behind. He had walked into a game he didn't even know he was playing, and he had lost. The crowd parted as the guards escorted him away, the whispers growing louder, the murmurs of disbelief and admiration filling the room. Keanu remained seated, calm as ever, watching the man disappear into the distance. Then, without a word, he picked up his whiskey glass and took another slow sip. The dealer, regaining his composure, cleared his throat and looked to Keanu. Would you like to continue the game, sir? Keanu considered for a moment, then gave a small smile. Deal me in. The tension dissolved into a wave of hushed excitement. The game resumed, but no one would forget what had just happened. Not tonight. Not ever. The older man had been escorted out, his presence erased as quickly as his false sense of power. But the energy he left behind still lingered, like the final note of a song that refused to fade. The crowd remained in hushed awe, some still whispering among themselves, others simply replaying the moment over and over in their minds. It wasn't every day that you watched someone make a complete fool of themselves in front of Keanu Reeves, only to learn, too late, that the man they had been trying to tear down was the one who held the keys to the kingdom. As the murmurs continued, Keanu sat there, unbothered, his fingers lightly drumming against the poker table as if nothing out of the ordinary had happened. The dealer, though trying to maintain his professional composure, had to clear his throat twice before managing to speak. Sir, your bet. Keanu glanced at his cards, the weight of the moment still pressing against the atmosphere. He knew he could play another hand, let the night continue like nothing had changed, but the truth was, everything had changed. Not for him. He had always known who he was. But for everyone else in the room, the illusion had shattered. He wasn't just another celebrity sitting at a high-stakes table. He wasn't a man to be dismissed, mocked, or tested. He was Keanu Reeves, and he owned this place. Slowly, he set his cards face down, letting the silence stretch before he spoke. I think I'm done for tonight. The dealer nodded immediately, collecting the cards, but the players around the table barely moved. They were still processing what they had just witnessed. Finally, one of them, a younger man who had stayed silent for most of the night, leaned forward. Can I just say, that was the most badass thing I've ever seen? A ripple of agreement moved through the others. A woman who had been sitting at the table the whole time, observing with quiet fascination, smirked. I was waiting for you to put him in his place, she said. But that was next level. Keanu only smiled, shaking his head slightly as he stood. It wasn't about putting him in his place. He exhaled lightly, as if shaking off the moment. It was about reminding him that everyone has a choice in how they treat people. He glanced toward the casino entrance, where the older man had disappeared moments ago. He made his choice. The table fell silent for a moment, the weight of Keanu's words settling over them. Then, the young man nodded. And he lost. A quiet chuckle spread through the table, not of cruelty, but of understanding. Keanu had won, not because he had the most money, not because he had the most power, but because he had stayed true to himself. And that, more than anything, was what people respected. As he turned to leave, one of the casino's senior managers approached, a respectful nod accompanying his presence. "Mr. Reeves, is there anything you'd like us to do about him?" He didn't need to say the name. Everyone knew who he meant. Keanu considered for a moment, then shook his head. "Let him go." The manager hesitated. "Are you sure?" Keanu's gaze remained steady. "Yeah." He took a step forward, then paused. "But make sure he knows he's not welcome back." The message was clear. The man had already lost his dignity tonight. There was no need to take anything else from him. But a lesson. That was his to keep. The manager nodded, stepping aside as Keanu made his way toward the exit. The whispers followed him, the subtle nods of respect from the staff, the knowing glances exchanged between guests who had just witnessed something unforgettable. As he reached the entrance, a young woman, one of the cocktail servers, stopped him briefly. "Excuse me, Mr. Reeves." He turned, his expression as patient as ever. She hesitated, then smiled. "I just wanted to say, thank you." He raised an eyebrow, his smile soft. "For what?" She glanced toward the floor, where she had stood watching as the older man's insults had escalated. "For standing up to him. A lot of us here have dealt with guys like that. We don't always get to see them put in their place." Keanu studied her for a moment, then gave a small nod. "People like that think they own the world," he said quietly. "Until someone reminds them they don't." She smiled, her respect for him deepening. "Well, you did that tonight." He chuckled, shaking his head slightly. "Didn't do anything special." She smirked. "With all due respect, Mr. Reeves, I think a lot of people here would disagree." He smiled, giving her a nod before finally stepping outside. The night air was cool against his skin as he walked toward his car, his hands tucked into his pockets. The city lights stretched before him, the sounds of Vegas humming in the background. He could have gone anywhere, could have done anything, but tonight, he had simply been himself. And that had been enough. As he got into his car and started the engine, he glanced at the casino in his rearview mirror, the neon lights reflecting in his eyes. A slight smirk tugged at his lips. "Not bad for a night at my own casino." Then, without another word, he drove off, disappearing into the city, leaving behind a story that would be told for years to come.